All right. Hey there, everyone. This is the next video lesson in the series of boot camp for options traders. All right. And this particular video lesson, we are going to be discussing right here. Oops, let's do this. We have to scroll down just a little bit. We are going to be discussing right here butterfly spreads and their relationships with a condor trade. All right. As I talked about in the last lesson, a condor spread is simply an iron condor is using both the puts and the calls. So, for example, let's just say we wanted to analyze selling an iron condor that puts a call credit spread in the puts. We'll just, let's say we were using a 50-point wide wing on the put side. And then we'll come up here to the call side, and let's just select, I don't know, 2150. How's that? So we've got a 2150 strike that we're selling. We have a 2200 strike that we're buying. So again, it's a call credit spread. The short is closer than the long, and a put credit spread where the short at 1900 is closer to the market than the long. And that creates this profile of a iron condor. Now, again, this is a high probability iron condor because you've got this area from essentially 1900 or 1890 to 2150 in which it will stay profitable. And what creates an iron condor compared to, say, an iron butterfly, or let's just say what is a butterfly trade? Well, is just where you place these option strikes. So if I came right at the money, 2170, and I analyze buying a butterfly, what is a butterfly? Well, all a butterfly is, it's one long strike, and I have to make these a little bit wider to show you what I mean. It is, a long strike is right here at 2070 or 2050. The short strike is here at 2070, and the long strike here is at 2090. All right, so you'll see for every short there's a long, so you're never unprotected and you're not trading naked. But you'll see that it's all on the put side. It can be all on the put side. It can be all in the call side. It doesn't really matter how you construct it because the put butterfly sells two, buys two. It's just the two longs that you have purchased are at different strike prices. All right. Now, that has the same profile look as, well, remember, we talked about debit and credit spreads. If I came right here at the money and let's say that I wanted to sell a vertical credit spread, 2070 and 2050, all right, so that is a put credit spread with the short being right at the money. Again, we have defined risk to the downside, we have defined profit potential to the upside, and if I do the same thing on the call side and I analyze selling a vertical credit spread, 2070 is the short, 2090 is the long. Again, we have defined risk to the upside. We have defined profit potential to the downside. But notice how the short strikes overlap one another. They are exactly the same. So that gives you this, it's called an iron butterfly because you have used the puts and the calls as opposed to just a regular butterfly where you use only the puts or only the calls. And what you'll notice here right off the bat, what you should notice is the profile looks the same, but this trade is going to cost me $165. You'll see that if it closes anywhere between 2046 and 2088, it'll be profitable. Otherwise, it's a losing trade. And the most I will lose is $165. Versus if I did this, the profile is exactly the same. My maximum risk is still the same. The most I will ever lose is $165. But look at what ends up happening is, all right, you explain the margin. Well, now the cost of selling one vertical is you've received a credit. Well, hold on just a second, you might ask. There's 20 points between the wings, so you have $2,000 of true margin minus the $685 of credit that you received, okay, to open this trade. So this right here has a net debit of $1,315 of margin that they are going to be holding you back on. This call credit spread, you have again $2,000 minus $1,150 of credit, so you have $850 debit that they're holding you back on margin. So when you add the $1,150 credit plus the $685 credit, you are taking in a net credit of $1,835 into your account. The most you can lose is $2,000 of margin minus your $1,835 credit that you've received, which makes it a $165 maximum loss trade. All right. The reason why I wanted to spend a couple extra minutes and explain that to you is because while the position is exactly the same, your maximum risk is $165, the construction is totally different. You've got puts and calls. These are credit spreads, not a debit. And when you go to fill, your fill prices and your fill times are going to be a little bit different versus using puts only or using the irons. All right, so this is a butterfly structure when the short strikes match up. Well, let's look at remember the iron condor that I just showed you. We'll come out here at the iron condor. We'll sell an iron condor. And let's just say we have, on the put side, we have 1900 and we have 1880. And on the call side, let's come up here to 2160 and 2180. So we've sold 2160. We have bought 2180. And what you'll notice is this is an iron condor, right? Well, as I start moving the shorts, which are right here, closer and closer together, both on the call side and on the put side, pay attention to what happens. As I move this 2160 closer to, say, 2140, all right? Or let's say that I move the 1900 up to 1940. Now you'll see as these get closer and closer and closer, what ends up happening is at some point if you have them match each other, so let's say we have 1900 on the put side and we bring this all the way down here to 1900 on the call side, you have 2180. Hold on, what have I done here? 1900, 2180, 1900, 1880. The puts on this put side have to become the same distance. So 1900 to 1700, 1900 to 2100. Now what you have created is an iron butterfly where the shorts are the same. If I wanted to move this farther away, well, if I move this up 50 points to say 1950 and 2150, well, look what happens. You see, now you're starting to spread the distance between your short strikes right here at 1900 and at 1950. The farther apart you go, so we'll say 20 and 2200. As you start widening out these short strikes to create more of an iron condor appearance, that is what changes your probability of profits. So again, this is a butterfly. The shorts are at the same strike. And let me widen this out to maybe show you a little bit clearer what it is that I'm showing. 2070, we'll go 2170, and we'll go 1970. All right, so you've got the shorts are at the same strike. They overlap at 2070. And as you come farther out on your long wings, you've got defined risk, you've got defined profit potential. Now, the reason you may choose to trade a butterfly spread as opposed to a condor, or as opposed to a credit spread or a debit spread, I mean, I hope you're starting to understand these can get very confusing very rapidly, which is why you have to practice. The relationship with the butterfly spread to a condor is completely related to just where are the short strikes. If the short strikes are the same, it's a butterfly. It is an absolute butterfly. It doesn't matter if it's a regular butterfly or if it's an iron butterfly. As long as the short strikes are the same, that is a butterfly. Once you begin changing those shorts and moving them apart, it is still considered a condor, all right? So I guess I could say, I could word it a little differently. A butterfly could be considered a condor. It's just the short strikes are the same. So that's the only difference between when you say butterfly and when you say condor. It's where your short strikes are positioned at. So I think that that's a really important concept to grasp, because while technically I could say this is a very narrow body condor, I would be correct in saying that, all right? It is a very narrow body condor, so I have very, very small risk, very, very high profit potential, which is exactly the opposite of, let's say I did something like this, where I maybe I've come way out here on the puts. We'll say 1900 and 1850. And we'll come way up on the calls to say maybe 2200 and 2250. Or we can probably even go farther than that. Let's say 2300 and 2350. The wider out you go, what changes here is you're giving up that risk amount. You'll see here I was only risking $165 to potentially make $9,000, whereas here I'm risking $3,000 to potentially make $1,800. So your risk to reward is what is going to change depending on how you vary these widths between your short strikes. All right, and so you'll notice that becomes a very relevant conversation when, if I want to keep a wide range around where the market is trading at, versus if I want to keep a very small range. If I want to construct a trade that maybe only stays within this little range, okay, I might choose to use a butterfly spread as opposed to a condor spread. Try not to, I guess, this can get very confusing very fast. Try not to think too much in terms of where the shorts go and, where's the optimum place to put them. A butterfly and a condor are terms that can be used interchangeably. It's just a butterfly has a short strikes at the same. All right, so let me open up option view here, and I want to show you how that looks from a time perspective when you're watching time elapse a little bit quicker than 2 or 3 weeks at a time. All right, so this is our option view software, and if I want to open up the Russell, and let's identify an area. So again, let me just come back here to this ranging part right here. Let's just say that I placed a trade right here on October 31st, and obviously this area hadn't happened yet on the chart, but let's just say I wanted to create a trade that stayed within these boundaries going forward starting on October 31st. All right, so those are the assumptions. So we will go back in time to October 31st. We will go to the end of the day, and we will just look at a trade. We'll walk through a trade here real quick. So you'll notice that there are 49 days until these options expire. My assumptions are that I want to construct a trade that stays within this boundary. I don't want it to get above 1190. I don't want it to get below 1100. All right, so if I come in here and I say, all right, 1190 is my upper boundary, all right, and 1100 is my lower boundary. Well, look at the trade that I've constructed. This is the trade that I have constructed. It's going to cost me $900. It has the potential to make $1,100. And that difference, pure and simple, is because there are 20 points between the wings. All right, I'm referring to these as wings, the one I've sold and the one I've purchased. So that $2,000 difference minus the credit you take in determines your risk to reward. So I'm risking 900 to make 1100. All right, so this is considered a condor. It's considered a, maybe a narrow condor, as opposed to, all right, well, I don't want to get that close. Let's say I want to come way out here and I want to go -1, +1, and I don't want to come in here. So maybe I'll come farther out here and I'll go -1, +1. Well, now what this shows you is, wow, well now, hold on a second. We've got a much wider area of safety, but the risk to reward is much more different. Risking $1,798 to potentially make $200. So, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have it both ways. If you're going to sacrifice one, you want to sacrifice the risk to reward. You're going to gain a higher range of profitability, a higher area of perceived safety. But the flip side of that is if you create a narrower range of profitability, your risk to reward greatly increases. And you'll notice that over right here, what do we get? The highest we ever got was up here to 1220, which means if we would have gotten all the way up here to 1220, that's the highest we ever got, we were never in any danger of losing this trade because it never got past this short strike here. It only has to be under this short strike at expiration. All right, so you'll notice that the condor feature is a little bit different than when I talk about using a butterfly. Remember, the butterfly has the short centered right at the money. So same profile. Come right here at 1170, -1, +1. So what I've done is nothing is unbalanced. You have, for every short there's a long. They are 20 points apart, and that's what it looks like. All right, so you're essentially risking $200 to make potentially $1,200. So you'll notice that it's not that one is better or worse than the other. They're just different. And I think that once you understand that the butterfly and the condor operate similarly, it's just where you place the wings and where you place the strikes, you will begin to understand why it is so important to practice both. You may gravitate towards one or the other. Personally, the condor and the butterfly are two trades that I trade exclusively month in, month out. And while I trade them a little similar to each other, they are managed very differently. And that's something that we'll be discussing kind of in an ongoing basis. But for this month right here, month number 7 that you are trading and you are practicing and you are, I'm sorry, not month 7, month number 9, these butterfly spreads, if you've already spent a whole month practicing condors and watching how they react and watching how they respond, well, now understand that these butterfly spreads operate very similarly. It's just the risk to reward profile is what is different. All right, you're risking a lot less to potentially make more when you have narrower wings versus you're risking a lot more to potentially make less with a higher probability of profit. So again, that's the butterfly spread. That's how it relates to the condor. Those terms are oftentimes used interchangeably, but I think it's important to understand the definitions first and how they operate differently so that when you are getting ready to execute your first live trade, you will know what to expect going forward. Okay, so thank you much again. I appreciate you listening, and we'll have 2 more, and we'll start putting this together so that I can show you some unique spreads that attempt to put several of these different type of spreads together into one. And then lastly, we'll discuss how you've traded for a year now. You've become very familiar with all the different kinds of spread trading. And by default, I promise you, you will have gravitated towards liking one or two more than the others. And that's when you should be spending, you know, I dare say you don't want to forget about the other ones, but if you find something that is making money, why would you want to go and do something different? You need to lean into something, lean into that thing that's making you money, and really step on it. All right? So thank you much, and we'll have another one coming in just a short while. All right, bye.